What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home here at fakepigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. Follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me once again, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? In honor of our beloved Big Ten conference announcing that they're going conference only, I figured I would rock my colors, the maize and blue.
Yep,
So
there's two types of people in this world: the smart ones and the not so smart ones, and we'll let the viewers decide which one is which. Uh, yeah, it seems like a lot of the college divisions are going to do that this year, assuming we even get football at all. I mean, I'll be
let's not even
happy.
talk about that.
But I am really excited to see when they kind of figure all that out, what like our win totals look like, what odds to win the conference
Mhm.
look like, all that stuff. I think it'll make it interesting, especially because you can always pencil in one or two or maybe even three wins if your team's playing out of conference games. Like they schedule the cupcakes, and it makes a 12, 11 or 12 win season not that crazy, but but they're all in conference. I'm going to see if they just play shorter season. We'll see, kind of how it
It
all shakes out.
it would be interesting to see if they just play everybody, especially in the Big Ten's case. There's 12 teams, so you can play 11 games, and I
Yeah,
mean that's a full season back in the day. So
that's basically what the Big 12 does. So I think it would be interesting to see all the conferences do that. And we'll see in the SEC, especially like how that shakes out. But we're not here to talk college football. We're not here to talk win totals. We are here to talk some Scott Fishbowl. Brian and I are both in Scott Fishbowl, the 10th rendition, the SFBX. So we're going to talk about our teams. We're going to give you guys some thoughts on kind of where our heads were at and all that stuff. For those of you that don't know, this is a super flex super flex league, so you can start an extra quarterback.
tight end
It's
premium.
tight end premium, so it's a full point PPR instead of a half point. You get points for first downs, you get points for a few different things. So the scoring's a little unique. So Brian, I guess in general, when you play in leagues that have a very unique scoring, is it hard for you to kind of figure out like how to adjust where you're mentally like, oh, I don't want to take a tight end this early, but they're worth more, so in theory I should be drafting him? And kind of where was your head at as you were coming into this league?
So this is my second year in this. Let me just start off with that. Last year I did horribly. I was probably in the bottom like 5% of all players.
Yeah,
It's a whirlwind. It's so much different. But like coming into this year, I've kind of over the last couple years I've kind of gone away from doing too much research because I think like sometimes you can kill yourself with that and you start overthinking things. So this one I came in with an open template and I was going to be doing my drafting based on how the other drafters were doing it. So in regards to the tight end, with how important that is, I had the sixth selection, and I could have went with either George Kittle or Travis Kelce, but I chose to go away from that, and I took the fourth running back off the board, Alvin Kamara, because I do happen to think that he's going to finish top three at the position. There's some positive touchdown regression coming his way. But like if Travis Kelce would have been taken second overall, I might have pulled the trigger and taken George Kittle instead of the running back there, just knowing that the tight ends are going to go a little bit quicker
yeah.
with the premium on them getting the 1 point PPR as opposed to a half for wide receivers, and how important it is for guys like that to get first downs and such.
Yeah, and all in terms of the Scott Fishbowl, like this is, I believe, my fifth or sixth year, so there's really a learning curve, and obviously Scott kind of adjusts the scoring on a year to year basis, but you really have to, like, it's really odd to kind of go in with a mentality of like my plan. And I had the 12th pick, and I'll show you Brian's roster, I'll show you my roster. Like my hope was that I was going to get a tight end. Honestly, if I was you, I probably would have taken Kelsey or Kittle, just because I think the elite tight ends are worth so much more in a league like this than everything else. And obviously getting Alvin Kamara, like, I can't fault you there. I love him as a player. I think, he has tremendous upside this season. But I just, one of those two guys. But let's jump in. Let's show our rosters, and we'll start with your team. And obviously, as you mentioned, this is Brian's roster. This is where he's at. We're both actually through 8 rounds, so it works out really nicely. Alvin Kamara there at the 106. Uh, Kyler Murray at 207, I think, is interesting. A play that, because I had the 112, 201. I genuinely consider Kyler Murray there because I think his upside is critical. And in a league like this where there's 1,000 something teams, right? So
Yes.
you're shooting for upside. You're not shooting for, like, obviously, in a normal 12 team league, if you can make the playoffs, you can get hot. You can add the right waiver wire piece, you're good. In a league like this, there's basically 11 weeks. They take the top 3 or 4 teams, I forget, from each division, and they throw them in a pile. And then basically you have to be the top half scoring team every single week to keep advancing. So you need to have a great team that scores a ton of points, and produces like crazy. And we've seen the last 2 years how much of a difference having a Patrick Mahomes, having a Kyler or a Lamar Jackson can have, especially in a league like this. Those are league upside players. Those are players that, like, I had an amazing year where I was like, I drafted Mahomes the year he broke out, and I was in the top, like 5% of the whole Scott Fish Bowl
Wow.
for a long time, just absolutely dominating. The rest of my team kind of fell apart at the end, so I didn't finish as strong as I'd hoped. But having a player like that is critical. Now, my one question for you is: do you think at 207 there's room for upside, room for him to be better? Or do you think you kind of drafted him at his ceiling?
I think he can perform better. I mean, especially in this league where it is a super flex and quarterbacks are going to get a lot more points than other players on a weekly basis. If we're looking at it from that vantage point, the only thing that kind of worried me about the Kyler selection was the fact that you're actually getting negative points this year for quarterback sacks, which with Kyler coming into his sophomore year and the kind of offense they like to run, he's going to be running around back there like a chicken with his head cut off again. And the sack numbers worry me a little bit as Arizona they address the offensive line in the draft and such, but he's still young, so I could see that happening. There's also a huge penalty for interceptions. I believe it's -4 points. So I'm hoping to see him with a little bit better decision making. But I do think with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, we're looking at a quicker passing game, which could lend more to more completions and less interceptions. So that's kind of why I like the pick and the fact that I think he can outperform that number in
Mhm.
Scott Fishbowl. But I will say the pick was basically warranted on the fact that there was a run on quarterbacks right before me as 3 consecutive went with Drew Brees, Dak Prescott, and Russell Wilson in that order.
Right.
And I was actually targeting Russell Wilson at that pick because of his ability to limit turnovers and limit interceptions.
Yeah, well, and I think to your point, like in a vacuum, 207 seems like a lot for Kyler Murray, but when
Mhm.
he's the sixth quarterback off the board, I feel a lot better about it. And I feel like the difference between him and kind of the next run, like Deshaun Watson would be the only other name that I think is kind of right there. Um, I feel like there's a decent drop off after him or Watson. So I get I would get pulling the trigger there. Um, I also love getting DeAndre Hopkins. I also like seeing him in his second year of the offense, understanding it more, thinking less. Guys that exploded in their second year, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying that he is that player, but there is a lot to like, a lot of similarities. They both can use their legs when they need to. I guess all three of them. Can have a lot of versatility. And when you have DeAndre Hopkins and Kenyon Drake and Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella and um, a lot of weapons in an offense that could throw as much as they do. Um, he definitely has the QB1 monster, tremendous season upside. And I've been doing some kind of projections and looking at touchdown averages, like average touchdown rate for quarterbacks. And Kyler Murray last year had like a 3.7 touchdown percentage, which for a quarterback is pretty terrible. Usually they're in the 5 to 6 is like the average quarterback.
I think
Um,
I think a lot of that can be attributed to their anemic red zone offense.
Yeah, but a lot of times that balances out and stabilizes. If we say give him a 5.7% touchdown rate, now you're looking at 30 touchdowns instead of 20. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
10 more touchdowns. That's a huge upgrade. And that doesn't account for, his rushing ability or maybe more yards or more consistency with his pass. So there's obviously a lot to like. And then I think getting Chris Godwin and Allen Robinson, is quite the dynamic duo. The one thing I will say that I really like to see is all the different drafts, because it really
Yes.
seems like everybody's different. Leagues are so individual; it's wild. You'll see leagues where running backs fly off the board, and you're getting receivers like, oh, I got Mike Evans in like the 6th round or the 7th round. And then you'll see other leagues where he goes really early, and then you'll see teams that draft all running backs or all receivers or some combination of
Yep.
quarterback and tight end. Like, so that is also kind of one of the fun experiences of this draft.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, like how each draft is its own like amoeba. For instance, in my draft, the top two guys, the guys with picks 1 and 2, both went running back, running back, running back with their first 3 picks, meaning that they took 6 of the top 12 guys off the board within the first 3 rounds. And, so that kind of puts an onus onto other people that, holy crap, I might have to start getting running backs because there's not going to be much left. Or like in my case, I took my one and I just kept taking the value at the other positions and trying to get the highest upside at the other positions, trying to get a leg up there, knowing that I was going to be behind the curve at running back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And that's the other thing too, is like you have to be willing to adapt and kind of be flexible in a league like this, because there's going to be opportunities for you to pounce, but there's also going to be opportunities where you have to see, okay, especially like if like you're in the middle, so you're it's a little easier for you to not to not have a run happen without you being able to kind of get involved. I
True.
picked 12th. So it's pretty much either I'm starting a run or I'm ending one. There's not usually a lot of in between. Um, so that is something to consider as well in a league like this.
Yeah, I had the 11th pick last year, and it was horrible. Being that it was my freshman year in the Scott Fish Bowl, like I was just clueless as to what I was doing when it came to ending or beginning runs, because like there was a lot of pressure at those last 2 turn picks.
Yeah, no. Um, and then getting Evan Ingram and Hayden Hurst, like obviously your team Hayden Hurst for life.
That's right,
Um,
baby.
big time season coming hit for him.
Top
Uh,
five
but
tight end finish.
But if these two guys finish, like, live up to their capabilities and perform that well, like in this league, a top 5 tight end is like a top 15 wide receiver in most years.
Yeah, I think I was doing some like searching on Twitter. I mean, there's just so much information about the Scott Fish Bowl because of like how world renowned it is for all it
Right.
does, and then outside of the fantasy world, but just in fantasy in general. I think there was something like 7 tight ends within the top 30 overall, like wide receiver
Yeah,
finishes last year. So you really see the difference in this league as opposed to a regular fantasy league when it goes towards the tight end position.
totally. And yeah, I think Jared Small has been tweeting out a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
about the Scott Fish Bowl and scoring and stuff, which has been super helpful for when you're trying to do a bunch of this stuff. He's been really good for me as well. Let's talk Josh Allen, because he is the one guy. And I'll give you some credit because I've seen a lot of smart people drafting him. Obviously, like late round quarterback. I think Brad Evans got him. Like, there's been some people that I genuinely respect their opinions and their fantasy football knowledge drafting him. But I have so much concerns about him, just in terms of like turning the ball over
Yep.
or incomplete
Sacks,
passes.
fumbles. Yep.
Like, I feel like some of the stuff he does could be really costly. At the same time, you look at that offense and go, Stephon Diggs, John
Yep.
Brown, Cole Beasley, Dawson Knox, Singletary, and Zach Moss. Another year, obviously the rushing floor every single week. Like I feel like Josh Allen in this league may have the highest ceiling and lowest floor of any quarterback.
This was easily, to this point, my most difficult decision as a draft pick. I kind of knew I was going to go with my second quarterback here, and I was
Mm-hmm.
really contemplating between him and Tom Brady,
Yeah.
just because you accumulate points for completions in this league as well. And Tom Brady's not going to turn it over, and he has the best weapons he's ever had. So I was really going back and forth, but Allen's rush upside, even with the expectation that he's going to see negative touchdown regression on the ground, but
Yeah.
the addition of Stephon Diggs and another year in this offense with a more dynamic big running back in Zach Moss than the freaking crypt keeper Frank Gore back there, like I just think that at QB 13 in this league in a super flex, I think, like you said, he has the highest upside of pretty much anyone in the quarterback room, but also the lowest downside.
Yep. Yep. And I think if your quarterbacks hit Kyler Murray and Josh Allen, like you have a league winning upside team. Like obviously you'll need some of your other pieces to come around, but having those two guys, if you say get two top five options at the position. Now, the one thing I will tell you is in terms of touchdown regression, Tom Brady vastly underperformed last year. He was a
Yep.
3.9% touchdown rate, and he averages 5.4. He should have thrown 33, and he only threw 24.
Not just
Um,
that. If you look at a Bruce Arians offense, I think taking all the quarterbacks that have played for him, if you put like in their season averages, isn't it something like a top 4, top 5 quarterback every
yeah,
year
yeah,
under him?
but if there, I feel like any other year I would be more aggressive towards drafting Brady because of all those things. I just with this year with the less practice time, with the new offense, with shorter off season, with a quarterback who's turning 75 or 76, like at some point it has to stop working, and maybe it's crazy to kind of avoid the landslide, and maybe we get one like Peyton Manning type year when he went to Denver and then it falls apart. Because if you look at that roster, Gronk and OJ Howard and Chris Godwin, and I drafted Mike Evans, so obviously I still have some faith. And
Yep.
um,
And with me having Godwin and Ronald Jones, I'm hoping Tom Brady has a damn good year.
yeah, and maybe you should have gone Brady and then had all three of those guys. And because and that's the other thing I've learned from some people that I that play in like high stakes or money leagues like this is having kind of like
Yeah,
DFS
the
type
stacks.
stacks.
Yep.
Those can be really advantageous because if that offense clicks the way you think it might be able to, then you're getting all the points. But at the same, like I said, Josh Allen has a ton of upside. A lot of smart people are drafting him. So I don't blame you one bit for going that way. Okay, Brian, anything else before we head on to my team?
Um, I mean, I think the last couple rounds have been probably the easiest selections
Okay.
for me. Just kind of the way that I went back to back tight ends. I think Evan Ingram is a huge value in round 6 as tight end 6, and I think
Yeah.
people were discounting how important they are with me being able to get him and Hurst back to back.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people still are sleeping on Ronald Jones, our boy Rojo down there in Tampa. Like somebody's got to get the ball at the goal line, and I don't think it's going to
Yeah.
be the rookie Keyshawn Vaughn. So
Yeah, Jones has been falling in a lot of drafts, and the Keyshawn Vaughn hype is very real. But we stand Ronald Jones on this podcast. He is our guy. So I love the pick, especially at RB 31. Like you're gonna have to piece some stuff together, but as somebody who likes to wait on running back, this is like my ideal strategy for almost any draft is get
I was,
one elite guy
yep.
early if I can, and then just wait.
Yeah, so normally if this was a redraft, pretty much everything after everything in the first 7 rounds would probably be wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end, and then I'd get my second running back, and then my quarterback would probably be like round 11 or 12.
Yeah. Let's switch focus. Let's
Yes,
let's
let's.
let's tear my team apart because I'm sure I did some stupid things as well. But through 8 rounds, this is my team. Brian, any instant reactions, any thoughts, anything you want to rake me over the coals for, or should I just plan my championship parade now?
Ah, man, I know you're all about your Buckeyes, but that Baltimore running back situation scares me to death with three guys back there, Ingram, Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins.
Uh huh. I drafted league winning upside
I
J.K.
like the
Dobbins,
upside. I like the upside,
and
especially he's your third running back.
exactly, and that was what in terms of like if I was in your situation and I only had
Yeah,
say
no.
Mixon, I probably wouldn't have pulled the trigger there. Um, but knowing that I have Mixon and Gurley and he's like my third option, so even if it's a few weeks for him to kind of try and gain focus of the offense and become the guy. And obviously, Mark Ingram's still a stud and was incredible last year. I just think there's so much opportunity for Dobbins. I think they drafted him high for a reason. I
Mhm.
think he's the best running back in this class. Don't at me. And I think I think he has the ability to take over this season, win leagues for people. And when I'm trying to compete for titles and trying to score as many points as I want as I can when the fantasy playoffs come, having J.K. Dobbins, I think, is critical for me. Like, I think it's going to be so important. Um, I got our boy Matthew Stafford. I'm a little worried because I drafted him before I was doing all my touchdown regression stats, and he should have. He had a 6.5 touchdown rate last year. He's usually about a 4.5, so that's a little concerning.
Yeah, but their
The
defense
only
got worse.
Right. Well, and they only played 8 games, and like I said, this was a guy that was on pace for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns last year. So if I can get 4,500 yards and 32 touchdowns, even with some regression, I'm all aboard that. Um, Jimmy Garoppolo as my QB2 was a tough decision, especially because it was either him or Philip Rivers, and obviously Philip Rivers last year terrible. Um, but this is a guy that should be around 5%, 5.5% for his average touchdown rate. So he should have had 30, 31, 32 instead of 23. And I also like this offensive line much better. I think he went in a clean pocket. He is a 70% passer in a messy pocket. It's like 33%. So it's a significant swing. And for all of you fake pigskin fans, I will be posting all of this information up on the website with some guys that I like to bounce back in big ways and guys that I'm a little concerned about having some regression and what that may look like. So that will be on the website as well relatively soon. But Tyreek Hill, Robert Woods, and Mike Evans. Mike Evans in the 6th round.
That's
Like
ridiculous.
that receiving core is so nice. I
Yeah,
don't have
I think that's your biggest strength for sure.
yeah. I don't have tight ends, so I'm very curious to see what that's going to look like in 9, 12, 10, 01. Hopefully my league mates aren't listening, but that's probably going to be a double tap of tight ends.
You're going to be cooking up some Sternbergers?
I'm thinking I may have to. And of course, as soon as I draft him, David and Njoku will get traded there. And completely make my life miserable. But I'm pulling up the queue right now just to see what is still available at the position. But like Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Gronk, Blake Jarwin, Hayden Hurst, Dallas Goddard, like Jay Sternberger,
Those guys
Johnny
are still
Smith,
available?
they're all still sitting out there.
How
So
many tight ends have been taken in your draft?
let me take a look and I'll give you an idea. And that's the thing is like every draft is so different, and there's some leagues where quarterbacks fall, where people are a lot more willing to wait. There's some leagues where they don't fall, and people aren't as willing to wait. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. This is great podcasting, right? 5, 6, 7.
There's only been 10 taken in my draft, and we're almost
8.
through 8.
Yeah, so we have 8 tight ends taken. Hunter Henry went at the end of round 7. So
That's ridiculous.
but see, that's the thing is, and that's why I've been comfortable waiting
Yeah.
at that position, because there's still plenty of options there, and that's why I think being, in terms of any draft you enter, being flexible, and letting the draft come to you. Don't force things. Don't go, oh well, there's still I this is normally where I want to take a tight end because that's how I practiced in my mocks. But if they're all falling and you can get a couple extra rounds and you can get some studs in between, or you see that running backs are going a little bit faster and you want to make sure you lock in one of those, or there's some receivers that are falling and you could see tight ends are going to keep going, like especially if you have so many options. That's why I always like draw a line underneath whatever player you're like your last guy that you're comfortable with, and then go up from there, and then start crossing them off. And once you get to a point where there's an option or two, or maybe three, like that's where you go, okay, I need to jump in here and grab. But if there's 5, 6, 7 guys you're comfortable with, like let the draft fall to you. Let somebody else panic and overdraft something else, and just count your winnings at the end.
Yeah, I mean that's a great strategy. And something else that like I was really adamant about in this year's draft was if there's a guy that I like and I tweeted about it, like they tell you to if you have a guy that you want to get, you go get him. So that's what I
Yep.
did with Hayden Hurst, and that's goes for the same thing in Scott Fishbowl, especially because you're going to get sniped by somebody here. And in once we get to redraft leagues, like you're okay going up a round or two in value to get a guy that you would rather have on your team than just waiting for similar base dudes.
Yeah, and that's the point. Is like if there's a clear drop off for you, like grab your guy. J.K. Dobbins was a guy that I almost took with my last turn, and I was like, there's still some running backs that I'd be fine with. As much as I love Dobbins, I'm fine pivoting because I want these these other positions. If you want to see the ADP, if you want to see our teams, if you want to see what everybody else is doing, Matthew Berry, late round quarterback, like all of the industry is in this league. Go to Roto Grinders, and they have a Scott Fishbowl app. You can see some of the unique things in the draft, who waited long at quarterback, who took the most. You can see draft positions. You can see who drafted certain players. You can see a few different things. And it's just kind of a good tool to kind of see where the industry as a whole is, because there's so many smart people, and then Brian and I are also in this draft, so um we're just hangers on. Yeah, exactly. So but it's really good tools, really good information. And I like to look at higher stakes leagues. I like to look at expert type leagues, because sometimes you'll notice a trend of a player that the smart people are continually drafting higher than average draft position, and maybe a round or two, maybe a few rounds. But if they continually go after someone, then there's probably a reason you should look into it more, and see if it's something that, in terms of your personal board, in terms of what you think, from a draft perspective, if you should be being more aggressive on.
Yeah, and just real quick, Josh Hornsby is the guy that does the Scott Fishbowl X app, and I don't know how the hell he has time to do this stuff, but this thing is super immersive. Like it has all sorts of information about. You can look over your league, you can look at ADP, you can look at every league in Scott Fishbowl. So yeah, props to him for doing that. And then, yeah, talking about like looking at who experts are taking, I think last year for me, I noticed the guy, Marquise Brown for Baltimore. Everybody was talking him up, especially in Scott Fishbowl last year, because you got like bonus points for big plays, and they kind of saw the writing on the wall that he was going to be that big guy, that big play guy for Lamar Jackson. And
Yep.
although he didn't do it the entire season, when he finally got to 80% health, he showed out why these experts were looking at guys like that.
Totally, totally. And if you're on Twitter, I recommend giving Josh Hornsby a follow. It's at Josh ADHD. Especially if you like visualizations and data and graphics and numbers for like why fantasy stuff happens, or why people are excited about a player. Some people don't like that, but I'm fascinated by kind of the numbers and the underlying information that kind of sets up the way we think about a player. So he's great for that. So I highly recommend following him. So Brian, I think what we'll do is call it here. Obviously, we are only 8 rounds in. Um, this is a 22 round draft, so maybe after the next eight, we'll come back. We'll give you guys updates on kind of where we are as our team. See what we like, see what we don't like. And then we'll kind of, as the season rolls along, take a couple minutes just to keep you updated on our SFB teams. Obviously, the last thing anybody wants to hear about is other people's fantasy teams. But I think I think it makes for a good process and a good understanding of where we're at and some of the players we like and why we like them, and see if they live up to the hype. So for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.